Hello, how are you?
Good.
Good.
See you.
Yes, can you hear me?
And now, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
He's out of
Hello.
We got 5 minutes.
How are you?
4 minutes. Good to see you. Sit down here and let's go to.
Time is, we're close to 5:30. Want to welcome everybody out to the Roy City Special Work Session for June 2025. Time is now 5:30. Want to recognize and welcome that we do have Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Saxton, Councilmember Wilson, Councilmember Scadden, and he's on the Zoom meeting, and Councilmember Paul. Today, Council, the focus of this conversation needs to stay on the budget. So that's why it's a special. So there may be other things you're interested in, but please, if you would, let's keep our conversation focused on budget-related issues. What we'd like to do, Matt and I'd like to do is just do an opening. We're going to kind of set the stage a little bit. You should have seen in your packet some charts. The information I'm going to share, I'm not going to put on the screen. You have your packet with you. I'm just going to walk through that real quickly. And then we can, Matt will go ahead and kind of lead the conversation with some charts he's prepared. Council, in the packet, and I wanted to make sure you've seen the latest information we had in terms of what the Roy City sales and use tax revenue by month has been. And then look at the trend lines. As we have been stating over and over again, particularly in the January and February work sessions, and now I'll make it clear in this work session. All indications is our sales tax, the single biggest revenue that we bring in, has flatlined. It's flatlined. That's the revenue streams. Interesting enough, as you go through the packet that I sent you, I took the information from the Utah Tax Commission and I basically pulled out our telecom, okay, taxes. I've also allowed you to see what the revenue we get from our public transit, the local option. I've also looked at the Royse City Municipal Energy, although you'll see in that particular chart some growth, but you're making about $100 a month in revenue on that one. I've even included Royse City's share of the liquor distribution tax that Royse City gets. And so you're really getting a pretty good feel on when the city is saying in the budget that they're estimating about $17 million in tax revenue, then you can kind of capture in essence where a lot of that's coming from based on some of the charts that I provided to you. I wanted you to make sure you've seen the latest information in terms of the gross taxable sales. When you're looking at sales tax revenue, the immediate reaction would be is so how does that relate in terms of how we're doing in terms of people purchasing stuff in Roy? And I will tell you, okay, I've never seen a quarter in Royse City and all the data that I collect that has been this high. In the fourth quarter of 2024, we went well over $45 million in sales in Roy. And we've never reached that before, ever. And so the issue in terms of sales tax revenue is not an issue that says that people are no longer spending. In fact, they continue to spend in Roy. The data is clear.
And that includes Amazon, right?
That includes Amazon.
I'm sure a lot, I know in my family, it's a lot of Amazon.
Yeah, it's in there. And we track that piece as well. I want to see exactly where we were in terms of how Amazon is just people ordering stuff from their home and it's delivered to home. So it captures that. So the issue really is that why are we not seeing then more sales tax? And as I indicated in the previous meetings and certainly in the packet, is that the state basically distributes sales tax revenue, what they call sales and use tax revenue based on a 50-50. 50% of what you get comes from the sale happening in Roy, which I'm saying to you is it's the best it's ever been. And 50% is actually based on population. And that's the issue that we're facing. And if you looked at data, which I like looking at data, the Kemsey Gardner Institute basically says in 2024, Utah had an increase in population of about 50,000 people. Interesting enough, half of those people came by migration, which means they came into the state by other places, certainly California, probably other places. And 50% of that 50,000 is a product of births, people living here who just remain and grow up here. So the issue then is then why did we not see our share of that? And the reality is that 49% of all that population, according to the estimates, went to Utah County. They basically acquired about, at least the numbers are showing around 26,000 or 26 of that 50,000 went to Utah County. The net increase in Weber County was about 1,500. And if you look at the data I provided to you, that 1,500 net increase that came to Weber County did not come to Roy. In fact, the numbers are projecting that our population numbers dropped by about 200 people. Now, luckily, there have been a lot of complaints about where the state was gathering those population numbers. And the reality of that is that we questioned that. I questioned the very census that took place during the pandemic. But the bottom line is so many indicators, so many things that we have are based on population. But the reality is that we hear the state is basically, under the law, is going to renegotiate and recalculate how those numbers will be presented. And I think, Matt, what we're hearing is Roy City should get back a few more numbers in population than what we're seeing today, which is a good thing, because so many calculations are based on that. Okay. So the end of the conversation really comes down to is that so what's happening here? And I provided you an interesting chart. And by the way, I should just indicate to you, if there's any question, 25% of all the money we make in gross sales, 25 comes from grocery stores. That's where the bulk of that's coming from. So with the automobile sales, all of the Amazon sales, all of that stuff, 25% comes from our grocery stores. And so they're a big game in our business. So you just need to recognize that. Now, I just wanted you to understand how this works as you look at the chart I showed you in terms of comparisons between the city. What you see in those charts came from Utah Tax Commission, certainly nothing I created. But when you look at Riverdale, who has an incredibly big commercial base, and you know that, you shop there, they made $1 billion in sales in 2024. In fact, over $1 billion. Roy City made about 534 million, half of what Riverdale did. But because of the 50-50 calculation and how it's done, the reality is that the data shows clearly, okay, Roy City got $2 million more revenue out of sales tax than Riverdale. Why? Because we have 38,000 some odd number of residents. They got 9,000. And when you include then that other 50% of sales tax distribution taking place based on population, they should have made a lot more in Riverdale and didn't. And so look at the data. The data is pretty clear. Population does matter. So I said in my report before I turn it over to Matt, we have a short-term issue and we have a long-term sustainment issue. And my concern fundamentally is we're going to deal with this issue on the short term today and on the 17th of June. There are some mandates the council has to have. But we need a long-term solution. And I've said ever since I've been in office, the long-term solution has to be generating new sales tax, generating new property tax through new development. That's the future. We have to continue on that track. So if we can build more business space in Roy City on the space that we have, we can generate more revenue. And I give you one illustration and then I'm going to stop talking. I told you that that piece of property south of Harmon's generates how much? $7,000 a year in property tax in Roy on that roughly 3.3 acres. If you just took one building, and I just took one building, 4-story building that's sitting in Ogden, that had a value, a market value around $21 million, Roy City would see a sizable increase in property tax just from one building sitting on that 3.3 acres. So the answer really is to maximize the utilization of the property we have. And in downtown Roy, it's all for the most part redeveloped. Although UDOT has carved out some land for us to start playing with. But the key would be is if we can substitute new development and get new property tax and new commercial that generates new sales tax, we can create more win-win situations for Roy and not have to be touching or even talking about property tax increases. I've never known, living all my days I've lived in Roy, ever seen where we've had back-to-back property tax increases. To back. And that's where we're talking. So the key would be is we need to think about solving the challenges today and then create the environment of where we're going to be for tomorrow and how we're going to get there. my opinion is it's about growth. And if we have to go vertical, then let's go vertical. Let's be smart about it, but let's go vertical. But the key is we've got to find ways to generate more revenue. And I think we can do that, but some of that's going to take time to work through. So that's the foundation I wanted you to see. That's the information I've provided to you. I'm a facts-based person. I'm just telling you, the data that I shared with you came from the source that tracks all this nonsense. And the data I've given you is that. So use it however you choose. I hope you've read through it. But right now we need to basically venture in terms of what we expect and what we plan to do tonight. So with that, Matt, I'm going to turn the rest of the time over to you before we have the council engage.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Before I get started, I know you've all read the packet that was sent out on Friday. Really, we're talking about 8 slides here. So this is meant to be a guided discussion and not a lecture. If you want a lecture, I can only promise that I'll get through it in record time. So please, if there's something you want to talk about, something you want to pause on, let's talk about it. There's only a couple of things that we wanted to get through here. So the first thing I wanted to indicate that this is not the first time we've had this discussion on the budget. As you know, we've had multiple deep dive work sessions on the budget. It starts at the first of the year, but we are in the latter part of this budget. The tentative budget was actually submitted to the city council back on May 6th, so you've had it about a month. I've received quite a few questions over it. Hopefully I've provided good answers to you. And if you have additional questions that you would like out in the public, you're welcome to talk about those tonight as well. That's what this time is for. Also, we'll be talking about this June 17th. There's still a couple of items that we need to decide though. We need to talk about an overestimate in the wage projections from the tentative budget. We have an additional $300,000 that we need to do something with, and that directly correlates with the big item tonight is identifying the preferred maximum tax rate for the June 17th meeting. That $300,000 could be repurposed into other areas that we're talking about tonight. There's 3 major areas of concern, or I guess shortfalls in the current budget. But to put in perspective, in the tentative budget, it was projected that the tax increase would be roughly 15%. I say roughly because we don't have that new tax number out until I think the 8th of June. But $300,000 savings would put us roughly around 9%. So later on in this slide, and you've probably read it, 1% is about $50,000. This is something that you have seen before, and we've talked it many, many times. But the mayor and I thought is important to talk about tonight again. But there's only a few different ways that you can balance the budget. One, you can raise the taxes. That's a direct revenue increase. You can increase emphasis on economic development, which is a delayed approach. You don't see some of those benefits for years. And then also cut services. The reason why I wanted to bring this up tonight too is because every one of them you can receive negative feedback. There's not some perfect solution to balancing this budget. Every one of them can affect people, be it raising taxes obviously has its effects on people, or cutting services could have effects on those same people that we're talking about. The bulk of the discussion tonight, I wanted to talk about the key challenges that we have faced in the city. In the manager's report, I did indicate that on average, the average city neighboring us has been more aggressive with their pay than Roy City has. So on average, we're indicating that we're about 14% behind. And you can see a direct correlation with that in turnover ratios within the city. Those can become more costly. I think the city's done an okay job about ever since we've done the last big salary increase that we have been keeping up with merits and COLAs. However, some of these other cities surrounding us have been just more aggressive because of market demand. And that's why we have been falling behind, not because we haven't been doing COLAs. we're going to talk about each one of these individually, just so you know. The other operation constraint that we've had is that last year we put in the 7.5% cut. That was an operational cut within every single department in the city. That was addressed in this budget, but not fully reinstated. We just went through, and I'll talk about this later, went through the items that we didn't necessarily have a choice over, like I always talk complex chemicals or complex and aquatic center power or whatever. Some of those things you can't really say, well, we're just not going to spend as much money on. But other than that, the rest of the cuts are still in the budgets. And then also I wanted to talk a little bit more in greater detail about some of the limitations that we have with setting aside funding for the future. I talked a little bit about this before, but 1% tax increase will give us around $50,000. Oftentimes you wonder where that tax increase is going. And we do provide graphs, but when you're talking about paying for employees, human capital versus operations can vary. So if you're saying, well, we're going to do a 50,000, 1% increase, $50,000 for human capital with COLAs, this is where the money's going. So 66% goes toward public safety. And then, Public Works sees very little of that tax increase because of the way the utility enterprise funds work and function. Remember, at any time you guys can talk and interrupt me. Intent. So, I wanted to talk about employee turnover. This is something that has been awfully challenging to the city lately. I put it in two different ways. I wanted to show you, this is for the last 3 years, but you have departments that are bleeding so bad that a 70% turnover ratio, I don't know how, it's unbearable, really. When you're talking the amount of employees that we have trained, that we have purchased things for, and when you talk to these employees, they are only leaving because of the pay. When you're 14% on average behind, it's not hard to find another job. There's a lot of demand for these positions out there. But yet I look at the department heads and they struggle day by day trying to make ends meet in their departments, being, very strategic on their approach of hiring and training and changing monies. It's become, the mayor and I were talking, like he sent an email to you guys that over his time here, it's always been a challenge. And I don't know if that challenge is ever going to go away, honestly. But something has truly got to be done. The 70%, it's just unsustainable. And I can only say that if we don't get ahead of it, we're only going to get behind it. And that one department can turn into multiple departments. I have heard different things about, I look at the department heads and they're all great leaders, great managers. And I see some of the things that people say online about, it has to be a management issue. I would challenge those people to come in and talk to them and talk to the staff. You have firefighters here, come talk to them and see what the issue is. Because I can only tell you, and you might not believe me, but it's a pay issue. They do very creative things to retain employees, and employees don't want to leave. And when you have to put food on the table, sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. So anyway, I think this is the first thing that I want to open it up for a larger discussion, because we need to collaborate and come up with different ways or a different approach to battle this and combat this issue.
All right, who wants to go first? As I say, I'm remote, so I can if nobody else wants to. So let's kind of just quickly drill into this as it relates to the wage compression issue, right? Back of math, easy napkin calculations that anybody can do is, let's say one of our employees is a $60,000 a year employee. At a 10% wage differential where they could take their skills elsewhere, which if you're not looking at this and saying that they're not doing that, then you're being disingenuous and it's happening. But a 10% pay differential for a $60,000 a year employee is $6,000 a year or $500 a month. And again, there's still another 4% above and beyond that. And that additional 4% actually equates and takes it up to where somebody that's a $60,000 employee at Roy City can go make another $8,400 a year or $700 a month. That can fundamentally, from a quality of life perspective, be the difference between having a very good high quality car or having a good high quality, vacation time off experience that anybody in their right mind in the regular free market, economy with skills would be remiss not to take advantage of if you can go take your skill set and take it to another, employer and get paid more, because that is the free market at play right here. And so we are fundamentally seeing that we are losing employees. We are a training ground. If we do not address the wage compression issues that we are seeing fundamentally across the board, then we are doing our constituents an absolute disservice. It is paramount that we as city council members go through and set the stage and say, we want to retain good, long-term, high-quality employees, and we're willing to turn around and do that by basically becoming more competitive with what's in the market out there. I'll pause there if anybody else wants to add in or, say anything else.
So, Randy, with that being said, what are some of your thoughts for like the solution kind of thing that you are probably just getting ready to?
Hey,
next?
Yes, absolutely. So again, when we fundamentally look at what was proposed to us from the budget documents, fantastic that we found another 300,000, but we kind of already set the pace when we actually went out there. So we already went out there and said we were looking at a 15% tax rate, which in my opinion is perfectly fine. Because what I think we go through and do is we turn around and we go to each of the individual departments and we give them the ability, especially police and fire. My thought process and rationale goes, we look at maybe turning around and earmarking, $250,000, which would still allow us to come down off of that 15%. We could actually peg the actual tax rate down to 14%, but we basically give $100,000 to police, $100,000 to fire, and $50,000 to administration to try and bridge that wage gap of that 14%. And basically kind of allow our directors to go through and decide where they want to take and land that money. And again, that still gives us the ability to say, hey, we projected 15%, but now we're coming down to 14%. And it's addressing our wage compression issue. I mean, as long as my maths, I think, at that 14% with that additional 300,000 that we were already, calculating in, that would allow us to address some of the wage disparity issues that we're actually seeing across the workforce.
Are you talking about this as a perpetual raise every year?
Yes. Because if we don't do it from a perpetual perspective and we do it as a one-time cash infusion, as somebody, as somebody who's going to be going up for re-election, if we don't set the stage now and make it as an in perpetuity, we're just kicking the can down the road like we've always done. So this at least sets the stage to where we address wage compression this year, and hopefully next year maybe economic conditions lighten people, because that's, again, when we look at the two fundamental areas with which we basically fund the city from, you have property taxes and you have sales taxes. Or sales tax revenue. And it's interesting because I get to the mayor's point with the $145 million that we actually saw people go through and spend, with it predominantly being in groceries. One thing that the state legislature did to us was they dropped the food tax rate lower than what it used to traditionally be. And so I think it's half of what it used to be. So I don't know if that, from a how things are being distributed is impacting. I wasn't able to like go through and do the deep dive on that. But to put it into context, for Royce City to take and receive $1 of revenue from property taxes, it takes the average homeowner at a 6.25% sales tax revenue spend $30, right? So what is less? $1 that, and again, the only thing we can bank on is property taxes, or for that exact same $1, I need every household to go out and spend $30. Or if it's, if we need $50 per household, that's going to be 30 times 50 is 1,500. Is that my math? $1,500 more per year. What's less, $50 or $1,500? And so again, that's how we have to go through and frame this as well. So I'll pause there.
So one of the concerns I have is that $540 of this budget is one-time money from the sale of the land. And for us to do an in perpetuity type of situation, we now have something possibly unsustainable because, history and economics say you shouldn't use one-time money for a long-term in perpetuity budget change. So that's a bit of a concern for me. I think that one option and then we still haven't even addressed the preventive measures.
Mm-hmm.
So the 300,000 is very beneficial in that regard, but maybe what we can do is think of it a little more on a one-time basis, so we don't get ourselves in a pickle as much. And then, like you're still saying, hope for the best. One of the things, maybe we could divide it a little differently. Maybe we put 100,000 of the one-time money into a preventive budget, because kicking the can down the road is, we still have to address that at some point in time. And then maybe 200,000, and certainly we can mix and match this, but maybe 200,000 could be used as a one-time wage adjustment, possibly, and something like that. But then you're kind of addressing two issues. So with that money, but that still leaves us 240,000 in the budget from that one-time sale. So we're still behind 240,000 in perpetuity that we're still going to have to make up.
Well, and apologies, as I say, I was not, my proposal wasn't to use the one-time funds. It was to still, because again, we found those, the three, again, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I was under the impression that we found an error in our budget documentation that showed there was a overspend of $300,000 for wages. Can somebody fact check me on that? Is that true, Matt, Amber? Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So what I am saying is when we went out to the general public, we told the general public with that $300,000 that we didn't know about, our effective tax rate was going to be 15%. But now what I'm saying is, congratulations, we have that 300,000, but we can actually now take the tax rate that we took and published from 15 down to 14. And that's still, and again, that's not taking the one-time funds. The one-time funds we still set aside. And again, from a budget perspective, I know we're just talking broad budget, but I have other ideas that I know Councilmember Saxton and I are in agreement on that we'd like to take and see those funds used for, but that's not in the context of this particular talk. But I'm saying, because we found that $300,000 and we'd already set the, again, kind of the pace with what we were looking at from what was presented for us back in May at 15%, we can lower it to 14% and still address the wage compression, because we would basically, again, provide that $100,000 for police and fire for their wage compression, and then $50,000 for administration. Does that clarify for you, Diane?
Maybe we can have Matt review it, but I understand part of that budget that we have that was balanced, that was because of the 540,000 from the sale. And so if we get 300,000 extra, that just means that we can shift 300,000 back over to that one-time sell into a different pot. Maybe you can review that, Matt, to see which is correct. And then
Yeah.
if we are going to do, wage increase, we still have to look at, I don't think it can just be public safety. I think we have to address all it, but,
No. My proposal, and again, we would have to back into, again, I only came up with 100,000, and the 50,000 for the three different silos. Well, and again, when I say administration, that's also Parks and Recreation, police, fire, public, everybody. And so, yeah, I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me.
what can you, Matt?
Would you like me to
Yeah, we
kind
can
of,
just kind of review that to
Yeah,
see
please, yeah.
which of us are kind of.
so
understanding
maybe, yeah, I'll just kind of talk about where we came about with that in the budget. So earlier on in the budget process, we had our work sessions. And during that time in city council meeting, we were selling that land, which we decided to sell. And it's still going through the process and we're about to receive those funds on. As part of the process earlier on, excuse me, we talked about using those funds for the budget to balance. And the problem with that is that it's only one-time money. And if we have it this year, the expense, next year, we're going to have that expense. So either we can, come up with a revenue another way by selling more land or something like that. Or you'd have to raise taxes or cut services, just like kind of where we are this year. So I think where Diane's coming from, is she's saying to change where that sell of land is because it's only one time and use a property tax increase in lieu of. So
Okay.
you have a more sustainable revenue throughout the years.
And,
But if you use that one-time fund and if you were to use that one-time funding for ongoing measures, you're going to create a shortfall for next year.
correct. And that my intent would be to, again, set that fund, the funds aside because we still have not yet received it. So as part of like the truth in taxation, would we be able to adjust the budget once we received it? But then also in terms of setting like the effective tax rate, I would not want to take and use that because again, it's the long-term in perpetuity aspect that we have to account for from a long-term like budgeting perspective. Because again, the one-time monies and the one-time funds, aren't things that again we all know we can't take and count on. So I would not want to take and have that as part of how we're balancing the budget.
And so that's I think that's where
Okay.
Councilmember Wilson's coming
Okay.
from, is right now it's currently in the budget.
In the budget for it. Okay.
To take that out, you would have to either cut or recreate new revenues to subsidize that.
Gotcha. Okay. That I'm following now.
I think her intentions are with that $300,000.
Okay.
Right? Am I right?
Right,
Okay.
if I understood it right, that it was already, that one-time sale was already in the current budget. So if we have 300,000 extra, then that means 300,000 of that 540 is out, but we're still with
Correct.
240,000 one-time money.
Mhm.
The budget at 15%, at a 15% raise. And so to make that up next year, if everything stays the same,
Right.
50,000 is 1%, we'd still have to have a 5% raise just to make up the difference for that one-time money that is still in the budget. So,
I'm following now. Yeah, I hadn't calculated that in, but no, I'm following what you're saying. So
and that's what I was kind of thinking, is I think, we need to probably keep the 15,000 just so we're not as far in the hole with the one-time money, 15%, I mean.
15%. Yeah. And I would be in favor of that because it addresses and gives us the funds for wage compression. And again, we have to address that. I'm sorry if it means a 15% tax rate, that is the right the right thing to do. Two, it's part of the social contract. I mean, when my aging mother or any of my siblings or anybody like that calls up for, police or fire or public works, I want the best, people to go out there and take and service them. Same thing with any of the constituents. They deserve to have, good long-term equality employees that are out there, basically providing the services at the level of service that they deserve is effectively what it comes down to.
My concern about putting that in as a long-term raise, however, then, is that now puts us into $540,000 we have to come up with next year. Because,
You're saying between COLAs and merits is what we're
well,
projecting.
and if we do a raise,
And if we do a raise, true.
so then that means we're now feel like $540,000 in the hole for next year. So if we could maybe balance it a little differently, do that one-time wage adjustment right now, but then, we talked about this in the last session of, we've got some department directors that could, within their department, come up with money possibly to adjust employee wages, allow them to do it. We've already had one proposal in that. And then that would be a long-term in perpetuity wage increase for that department. It may not work for everyone, but we at least have one department that's willing to do that and are able to, willing and able. So then you'd kind of have a dual source. You'd have that one-time wage adjustment, plus if the department can possibly come up with money in their department, of course, they'd have to make sure that, it goes through Matt and there weren't problems with jeopardizing the services. But if they could use that, then that would be kind of a two-pronged approach to helping this problem is an idea that I've been thinking about.
Correct. And when we're talking about the department, are you, as I say, the department head that's out there, who you are you willing to step up and say that this is something you agreed to? Because again, I'm in support. I believe it sounds like Councilmember Wilson is also in support. But let's hear it from the actual director themselves. Because again, we've kind of played this out and I think we've had discussions and it sounds like a potentially good path forward.
I think we need to have a better definition of what the question is.
Who are we talking about? I know who we're talking about. And again, with this particular department.
I got that part.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's a broader conversation. What's on the table and everybody's alluding to, Chief, is the fact is you said, and it kind of came out in the last conversation, you're willing to take, if necessary, cuts in staffing specifically to generate enough revenue for you to give your entire fleet of people the needed salary increases so you can sustain them.
Exactly.
And that's what you've offered. And I think
Correct.
I'm gonna jump around it, Chief, you've made that offer. And I'm sensing it gains at least some attraction from council members. Says if this department is willing to do that, why would we not let him do that and make sure he's got the additional funds to be able to raise the salary of his department?
Right. My goal is to keep us competitive, and that was one solution to help both sides, to help the city and to help our employees. And they're willing on their backs to do that.
And you've been.
That would be more of a hiring freeze, not to remove the positions, but to freeze the positions until the city can improve their financial situation, whether it comes through economic development, sales tax, whatever. That's through the discussion of our department. That's what we can do to offer that.
Now, is it a hiring freeze that we'd have to put into effect, or would we have to eliminate the positions but still recognize the funding?
No, we've been down and we have not hired them for over 6
Right.
months.
Right.
So
No, I'm saying from an accounting perspective, because again, if you freeze it, it still shows up on your budget, but you don't get to take and redistribute those funds because with how budgeting works, it's a fully loaded position that, again, I guess, what is our process by which we would take and freeze the positions, but also free up the funds to be dispersed to address like the wage compression? I guess that's a Matt Andrews question.
It's technically in the same account. Because you're
Okay.
talking about permanent full-time wages, and so you get your projections off of how many employees. The only thing that would change is the employee count for that department.
Okay.
You know, we do a count on the budget, that would potentially change. And I think Chief Williams in defense is saying, you know, this is something that's hard for us to do, and I'm willing to sacrifice these two positions in hopes that when things get better, that the city would give it back. I think that's simply all he's saying.
Okay.
Say that when that time comes would also, it would require a council support to refund those positions. So,
I would not support removing the positions. That was worked really hard for years ago, and that's not something I'm willing to do. I am willing to freeze them to help to offset the costs, but to take those away, I'm not willing to negotiate that.
Well, at this point, I think there's a couple of things that we need to understand from this. If the council's basically saying is, let's entertain the fire department's interest in doing this, then what you're also saying, and the council have to approve would be, is that for those grades, those positions within the fire department, there will be some increase in salaries, okay, in that department to be able to help you achieve what you want because you're sacrificing those two individuals, those two positions. And so, in my opinion, if the council agrees to that, then that needs to be a statement inside this document that you will approve, if you agree to it, that says he will forgo those two positions, not permanently remove them, but certainly not fill them. And then give him the authority now to go into each one of those positions on the merits or however you fund those and got those set, that they'll increase those prices. I don't know personally, Amber, to be honest with you. We're 14% behind. And if we use your calculations and 14%, we're $1.2 million just to bring everybody where they're equal to other cities. 1.2 million. Now, if it can be done where you can get closer to where you could be, Chief, then maybe the council, I think that's a great thing. And I think the council, if they agree to it, that's what you need to have in that budget document to support that. I would like to say it gets where you need to be, it gets you right where you need to be, but I don't know at this moment what the salary would be and benefits will gain from that, but it should get you pretty darn close.
And we're 14.7 our wage study. That was 6 months ago. So what we're looking for is to be competitive, and to be competitive is the 14.7, if not 15, as soon as July hits and everybody else makes an adjustment, we have to compensate for that.
Okay. So council, that's the issue that's on the table dealing with the fire department.
So the 15% tax increase, and that's with you, that would bring you up to, you won't be losing all of your 70%.
That makes us competitive within the
Makes you
current
competitive.
market.
Well,
And that's with,
let me make sure we understand that, Matt, because I think there's a little confusion. A 15% property tax increase today, okay, if you agree to that. First thing is that 75, when we walked into the budget, there was $750,000. That's the deficit. Amber, in her hard work, basically was able to find 300,000 that, so the net difference is 450,000. If you take $450,000 and find a way to source that, then you're paying for all of the COLA for all employees and all of the merit increases for all employees. That's what it gets you. But it doesn't solve the problem in terms of the 14% deficit in terms of the competitiveness against other cities. It just gets us, it's part of the way, but it doesn't get us there. We still have to face at some point in time, we have to face the issue in terms of the difference that exists between neighboring cities in terms of what we're paying employees. And he said in the document, and you read it, and he said it in the meeting, we're still 14% under. That's $1.2 million.
yes, on average. And then, like Chief Williams was saying, I can't remember, it was 15% or something.
Or 14.7, but really
14.7.
15, that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah.
And so there's no correlation between this 15% and a tax increase for
Right.
50%.
I don't know that number. I'm just telling you, for our department, that's where we
You
stand.
need 15%. It's you so you can basically start breathing. So I think it can be worked, and I think with the savings that Amber you achieved, the finding in 300,000 will certainly help. But the real issue really comes down to is there gonna be enough to be able to pay all the other employees their COLA as presented in the budget and their merit increases as presented in the budget? That's what they're saying. And now, if the chief says, hey, I'm gonna go one step further so I can help me, I need to be a little above that. Because I need to get where I can keep my people. And he's saying is, I'm willing to give two people up so that me, him, his organization now can take what would be normally approved, which would be the COLA and the merit increases, and he can increase that a little bit for his department to cover the other costs he's losing. He needs that little bit of an increase.
And the
That's what
two
I'm-
employees will drop that percent, so I'm saying 15. If we approve the two employees, that drops that percentage, and that's how we're offsetting the cost of that increase.
But you still have to get the COLA and you still gotta get the
Correct.
merit increases.
Right,
You
that's,
gotta get above that.
yeah,
So-
that's part of the 15%, right? The 15% tax increase has been proposed.
Well, if you take it out of there, if that's where you choose to pay it, if you want to pay it, that can be calculated out. I'm just saying is that he's gonna go one step further.
Right,
He's gonna simply says, I'm gonna take two employees, I'm not going to fill those positions, and the salary and benefit we would have paid for them, I want that to be added to help me get a little bit higher than that.
Mhm.
So that's his contribution. The 15%, all the 15% was going to do is it will cover in the general fund, it will cover all of the employees that are in the general fund in terms of their COLAs and stuff, and give you, the city, $300,000, okay, extra to do something with. Now, some of that certainly could go to the others, but the reality is that it's not going to solve the problem because we're still far behind in terms of finding at least some balance between what we're paying and what they're paying other cities for the same skills. But it does make a pretty good jump. It gets us a little closer. And I think if you agree to that principle, then Amber and Matt's objective would be for the 17th meeting would be to come in as close as they can and says, this is the data, this is the number we need. And you'll find out where you are on it. But I don't want, Chief, I don't want to lose what you're offering. Now, that's this side of that conversation. This is the general fund side. We've not even talked about Brandon's problem. And Brandon has the same problem. You look at the numbers in terms of loss. So the question is, he's being funded through enterprise funds. The question is, how are you going to fix him? It's not a property tax issue.
well,
Wanna do it?
that extra 300,000 that is from the one-time money, 300,000, we can do a one-time of some division of that. We can do a one-time wage adjustment to help everyone, and maybe do it proportionally to their percentage of how far behind they are on that survey. You know, the fire department's a little higher than 40%, maybe another department's a little less. That's a one-time thing, but long-term, if by chance Brandon happens to have a position that he could hold off and you do the same thing as the fire department, then that would be a long-term solution for longevity. And luckily, his department, because he does have extra funds, maybe has a little smaller total pot, but I don't know if that's an idea or thought. What are you thinking, Brandon?
Can you go back to the one slide, Matt? Go back one slide where it talks about the percentages for the different departments. There we go. Thank you.
So I mean, my department, like you said, it's tricky just because I use enterprise funds and I do have a couple departments that use general funds. So that's where it gets tricky is if I say I don't fill a position in my enterprise, I can't use that for general fund employees. So,
Yeah,
so basically the one department that I have is my street department that's fully funded out of the general fund. That department has actually shrunk since 2009. We used to have 11 employees. Now we have 8. So we're already running pretty thin there. We have 9 salt routes. I have 8 guys in that department, so we're already relying on other departments to help us. So like I would love to say that I can help, but I'm already, you know, running on thin ice with how many guys I have.
My comment, Brandon, for your situation would be is if the council basically suggests that you take part of your enterprise funds, that part that you control more than maybe they control to the extent, they're not part of the general fund, and take some of the funding out of that to pay additional salaries to your employees. Get them up or become market equal, I guess is the best way to put it. You would then go in and be able to have to go in and change the pay for that, and the council would have to approve that if they approve that. That will fix a big part of
Yeah.
public works.
I'm heavily enterprise fund, so yes, that would help me a ton. And I've addressed this before, is I think the merit system is broken so I'm trying to retain employees. We're starting them out, and we're giving them a 2% raise. So it's actually goes from a 2 to a 2.25 to a 2.5. So to me, that's backwards. We would like to be a little bit more aggressive at the front end, because I think that's the time when we can. Because after we get guys that have been here 5 to 10 years, they start realizing the benefits, and they start enjoying their job a little bit more. But at first, it's hard for a young kid to start out, gets a 30-cent raise. So it's frustrating. And then I've said this before is, you know, public safety gets the 3.75. All my guys know they get bigger raises. So I think it causes a little bit of a divide as well, so.
Well, and just to kind of put it into perspective, as someone who just took and hired a new employee, when I went to our compensation board, they explicitly instructed me to go to the top of what we could take and pay them. Not at the bottom, not at the middle. They said legitimately go to the top, because it's easier to go higher and get up there that fast, because you can turn around and retain the employee for longer. And again, as we're going through this economic turmoil, you don't necessarily have to go through and give them nearly as big of bumps and increases over time. So again, maybe maybe that's the solution. Instead of starting at the, you know, lower rung, maybe we land somewhere in the middle. So that way there's, you know, less consternation, I guess, as far as, you know, what we're taking and paying. And I know like on for like police and fire, you'll typically do laterals. And so I don't know what the equivalent from a lateral perspective would be for somebody like in public works or administration or something of that nature. But again, that's having just gone through hiring an individual. That's what our compensation committee actually told me to do, is to go to the high side of the actual comp plan.
And trust me, I've thought about that, but the problem I have is I have dedicated guys that've been here, like you said, around 5 years, that I don't feel right bringing a new guy in and paying him more.
But that speaks directly to the issue we're trying to address, is they can laterally move to another city and make more money. And so again, that's kind of, we're always going to be in this catch-22, but again, we have to set the framework now going forward, so we're not into this. We land somebody there, they train for a few years, and then they take those skills out to the free market and, you know, capitalize on what it was we have taken and trained them on. We have to think from a long-term, you know, employee retention perspective. So, and again, there's no silver bullet in my mind that takes and does that, except for trying to find some type of happy medium with taking and starting somebody at a more middle ground, you know, compensation perspective. So.
So Brandon, would you be able to do that? Like,
No, like I said, that's been my main problem is I've had the latitude, and I've heard laterals and everything, and I've been strictly against that, just because I don't want to kill the morale of my department. I want to go take care of my guys that's gave me 5 good years.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, if we could get my guys that's had 5+ years and get them into a situation where I actually have the ability to bring somebody in the middle of the pay scale, that'd be phenomenal. But I just don't have that ability. I mean, I've heard of these laterals, and I've had probably 3 guys apply from different cities, and I'm not even playing in the same ballpark with wages. We've offered them, and we're not even in the ballpark with them.
Which I think, to the point is, and Chief, Williams, to your point, and I certainly read the documents from other departments, it's the real issue. Our city is at this moment not competitive to keep what we've got. And so the challenge then, Matt, would be to fix it, and that just brings us average, is a $1.2 million bill.
2.1.
Okay, so 2.1.
Oh.
And so.
Oh, okay.
So when you look at $2.1 million, it's not in this budget. It's not in this budget. So what we got in this budget is to basically get everybody a COLA, get everybody their merit increase. As it sits right now, that's what's in the budget. And to get there, we need $450,000 more. And you have to, as a council, decide how you want to get there. You want to raise property taxes to 9%, and that gets us there. If you want to get more out of that, then you may have to consider a higher property tax rate.
To get
Well-
$2.1 million increase, it'd have to be just for that would be a 42% increase for taxes.
There's
So-
the issue.
That's where we're coming in at.
So the issue then, and this has to be fixed. It has to be fixed. The issue then becomes is that you have on the table with you, what's been presented is a need for a 9% property tax increase. That just gets everybody moving still in the same direction, but does not fix the problem. If you choose to want to raise that property tax beyond the 9%, then if you do, then you can certainly make it part of the condition that says we're going to start challenging, or we're going to take on these issues in terms of trying to about pay. But don't lose sight of Brandon's point. What Brandon simply says, and Brandon, I agree, Royce City's mayor promotion process is broke. And we need to have a systemic solution. You're not going to fix that in this budget. But maybe the whole idea in terms of how we compensate needs to be revisited. Because I'm not so sure, it's never been successful since I've been in office. We fight this battle every flipping year. And we can't seem to keep fixing it because we can't. It's just not designed to be fixed. Matt and I collectively, it was a time when I was here, you either got a COLA or you got your merit. And sometimes they got merits. Today, in the last couple of years, they got merit and COLA. Still can't fix it. So what's the solution? And we got to look at a different approach. So what's in front of you would be is that you've got to make a decision about whether or not 9% is enough, and it is, or more. And whatever more.
15%. You said 15%.
If they have to say, where's the 9 coming from? Because I'm fixated on 15% because that's what we put out to the general public. And
And 15% is only like, what, maybe, because I know my taxes went up last year. I have my statement here at 13.8%. It was basically $4 a month.
Yeah.
Is what I paid. So, extra.
Well,
I brought my, yeah.
yeah, the 15, here's, make sure we understand where the math is. The 15% was proposed in support of the $750,000 deficit in the budget. Amber found 300,000. Now the number is 450. To get $450,000 so you can pay for the budget as written is a 9% property tax increase. That's what's in front of you. If you want to take more to be able to deal with employee compensation, and you're talking and you agree to 15%, then you're going to put $300,000 more in the pot to deal with compensation. The bill is a $2.1 million bill, and certainly $300,000 gets us closer, but it's not going to fix it. It just gets us closer. The chief's point would be is I'm going to go one step further. He's saying is I'm willing to make this sacrifice, and by making this sacrifice, he is probably going to come real close, if not spot on, where he's going to say, I'm going to be able to get my people a salary that's going to be competitive in the market, in his department. But it doesn't say anything for Michelle's. It certainly doesn't say anything for Chief Gwen's. And we still got to work out what Brandon's going to need to keep the bleeding from his organization. And that's not saying anything about the Amber, your organization. So the real issue is going to be is if you're going to say, here's the property tax rate I'm willing to live with, and you and Randy, maybe 15% is acceptable. If it is, then that's the number we need to walk out of here tonight. If it's not, give us a number.
But we have to remember that 15% still puts us using $240,000 of one-time money. So it's putting us in the hole,
We have to make up that deficit next year. Yeah,
Right.
that's the only dilemma. So again, are we saying that we would want to go? Because that would effectively bring us up to account for that 240. Let's just round it up to 250 because that's easier because you can just go 5, it'd be another 5 points. We'd have to take it up to a 20% tax rate to
Exactly.
basically account for that. So slightly less than that, but yeah, just slightly under 20%.
You need to set a ceiling for Matt tonight.
No, don't we do that on the 17th?
That's when you vote on it.
Right.
He needs to walk out of here with it. I don't want to have the same conversation about this reason for this workshop.
Okay.
Is what's the top number so he can put it on there. You can make it, you can say 15%. And as long as when you vote on it on the 17th, it doesn't go any higher than 15%, you're fine.
So
And you
if
can
we
make
did
it-
15% on a $400,000 home, how much would that be basically a month for a resident compared to a 20%?
About $75 a month.
No, a year. 75,000 or $75 a year. A year.
So just to,
For 15%.
just to clarify, so legally you cannot set the top
Yeah.
tonight.
Right. That's what I thought. We can give guidance.
Just guided. So if we did a 15%, it'd be $75 a year for a household. What about then 20%? Then
Okay, and here's the
divided up
piece. The
12
bud-
months, that's
the budget-
like,
The budget already asked you also to add $75 a year increase in both sewer and water.
right.
So
Well, all I'm saying is, I want to keep my fire department, I want to keep my police department. I mean, the fire department's like a family, you know, I mean, they all live together, they sleep together, they're a family. And every time you lose somebody, and they've lost so many employees, it's like bringing another family member in. And I want to keep our chief, you know, I don't want him to leave. He's worked so hard to keep this family together. And I've talked with his employees and then our fire department, I mean, it's the same thing. You know, if you get in a situation where you have a shooting or somebody and you have a rookie there, I mean, you could possibly die in that situation if you don't have somebody who's been on the job training. And that's what fire and police are, on the job training. And so I know with my family that lives in the city and my brothers and my kids that live here, they're like, if I have an emergency at my house, I want somebody who's not been on the job for under a year, I want somebody who knows what they're doing, and that's what the fire department needs, is people who who stay there, and then they, you know, become a family, and they learn on the job training, because that's basically what a fire department is, in my opinion, is on the job training. Most jobs are on the job training, but more so for a fire department or even a police department. So I just don't want to I just want to get them to be able to stay in the city. And if that is $7 a month more, I'm on Social Security. I don't want to raise the taxes, but I'm going to have a freaking heart attack. I want somebody to come to my house, knows what they're doing. And I want a policeman to be able to protect my kids and my grandkids. And I want my grandkids and my grandchildren to play sports and have the water department and my roads fixed. It's just like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If we want to have everything in our city to run and be a great city to live in and have all these departments run smoothly, we have to pay for it as a citizen. I mean, that's just, you know, what it has to be. And so I'm just saying, if it's only going to be 15% to keep everybody there, then that's great. But if you guys go through and figure out it has to be 20%, and that's maybe $3 more a month, then, you know, I know it's not popular. I want to retire one day myself. But I want to have our city I want someone to move here and know that they have a good police, fire, parks department. I don't want to start cutting parks, programs and not have basketball no more or softball or whatever, start cutting programs and not being able to fertilize our lawn and do all those things that make a city a city. And that's why I've lived in Roy pretty much my whole entire life. And I have children that lived here their whole life. And I just want to quit kicking the can down the road. And every year we have to face this budget. And I know it's not a popular thing, Brian, and I know it's not a popular thing to raise the taxes. But I don't want to lose our employees neither. And you can't have it both ways.
I mean, it's part, again, to my point, it is part of the social contract. If your next door neighbor came to you and said, dear neighbor, if any of my neighbors came to me and said, hey, I have a medical emergency and I need to borrow $75, you know what I'm doing? I'm saying, what's your Venmo? Or, here's a credit card. And I'm going to give them that. That's effectively what we are taking and doing and saying. If we go through and say that if we set whatever we set the tax rate at, that's what we're doing. It's part of just being part of a civilized society. And it's the social contract. It's the social contract.
Brian, go ahead. Do you have a comment?
Thanks. I don't want to be the one that says no to police and fire. But I want to say that when you raise property taxes, you don't only raise them on those that are on a fixed income, but you raise them on the young families wanting to live here, move here, that can't afford to. You raise them on the disadvantaged. And the truth of the matter is that there is a lot of people in Roy that are going to be hurt with this streak of continued property tax increases. We are still at the same problem, and we will have raised, this council will have raised over 40%, nearly 40% in tax rates the last 3 years. And that's a lot for anybody to swallow.
And we still can't keep our employees here.
Correct.
I understand that.
So,
I do
I
understand
know,
that.
I don't know.
And
what
these
they-
are the very people
Right.
that saved my life
Right.
to get me to come here and debate with you. But the
Right.
problem is that this is only gonna fix it 1 year, and we're gonna be back here unless we change the formula.
Well,
So, and we've put in place the ability to take and change the formula. In fact, the mayor alluded to that with what we're doing from an economic development perspective. Economic development is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We have to set the stage to make it so businesses, and again, a developer is just another name for a business. We need to set the stage to bring in, bigger, better economic development. The mayor himself was just on TV. If you didn't watch it, he was standing in the background with Governor Cox, and they had, the mayor from Clearfield talk about their transit oriented, their transit station, right? They are the first one to take and kick off economic development as part of their front runner station. We have that ability, and we are now starting to see that momentum being built. And again, it's going to be painful. And that's just calling a spade a spade. It is going to be painful for the next few years, because the only means with which we have to guarantee and be able to balance the budget, I'm sorry, and I'm going to sadly admit it, is going to be on the backs of property tax increases. And again, I'm completely and totally, Brian, I absolutely love and adore you. Your heart is absolutely in the right place. And my mother is on a fixed income. Ann is on a fixed income. But if an additional $75 a year is what takes and pushes you over the edge, please come to me, because I will loan you the $75 to help get you through this.
Well,
It
and look at,
isn't for me,
well, those
okay?
houses that
I
that we
don't
just
mind
passed.
paying my taxes.
Hold on,
And
I
those
just-
passed,
hold on. Let's make sure we get this right.
and we
Okay?
just did those
And
on
comment.
5,500, those townhomes, and that was $900 and something a year in taxes we were getting off of that, 4.62 acres. Well, he's gonna build those townhomes in there. It's gonna be probably around $20,000. It's gonna take him a couple years to do it. Then all that controversial, you know, off between 4,400 and 4,800, that's gonna bring in a lot of tax revenue. And there's other things in the works throughout the city that are gonna bring in their building. So I'm hoping that we're gonna generate more revenue through some more businesses and some more property taxes, and then we won't have to raise the taxes.
Correct. Correct. I mean, we went through and we also just adjusted the fee schedule, which we hadn't done in over 20 years. And again, with these developers coming in, they are now paying what is equivalent to what they're paying everywhere else. And so we're going to see additional, you know, revenues come in from just the fee increases alone. So again, we don't even know what that's going to look like out over the horizon, but we have gone through and set the effective stage to basically make it so hopefully long-term wise, we are now being, from a fees perspective, we're more, you know, in comparison to our peers on the network in the area. And again, this is a long game. This is not, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay, oh, thanks, Randy. And finish your comment.
Sorry.
So I'm just saying, with those townhomes and the other subdivision the other townhomes. And then, you know, there's some developers looking at some properties in Roy, then we'll get the News Wells Fargo building, and then maybe the Cafe Rio. I mean, there are things that are being built in Roy, and the Wendy's, I mean, that's not, you know, tons of money, but every little bit helps. And, you know, the property by Les Schwab, I mean, they're looking at building something there. I mean, I think that you know, it's gonna be a couple years, hopefully, they'll get going on these projects, and some of them are already in the works. So, you know, unless people start buying other properties, they're sitting, we don't have a lot of room for growth, but then we'll get those condos or whatever they are down by the track station. When they build those, and then hopefully by them building those, then a small business will say, well, hey, those people live there, I could build this and do that. So I think that, you know, the future looks bright for Roy City, that we do have some things coming in, and I'm hoping we're not gonna have to keep doing this, but I just don't wanna lose our employees that we have now. I just feel bad for all the heads of these departments. And so, you know, like, you know, Randy said, $75 a year, I know that is a lot to a lot of people. But you've got to sustain all the employees that we have now. We can't just keep letting them go to other cities. We train them, and then the other cities take them.
Thanks, Sam. Brian, you want to finish your thought?
No, I mean, yes, I do.
Please.
We do have hope on the horizon. But if that hope arrives, are we ever going to reduce the property taxes? And the answer is no. Once you put a tax on, it's there. And I look at the faces of our public safety, and I have nothing but admiration and respect. True story. I call them when I need them, and they came and they saved me. I don't know what else to say, but I live among people that I'm telling you, this is gonna chew them up. Another 15% added onto what we added this year, what you added on the year prior. I mean,
So mine went up $3.81 a month, my taxes last year, by our tax increase. I mean, my house is only valued at $400,000, so I don't live in a mansion or anything. And so it would probably raise my taxes $6, $7 a month. And so, I mean, that's 2 drinks at Maverick, which I don't go to Maverick, but I just think people have to make choices where they spend their money. And some people barely live, I know, paycheck to paycheck, and barely can have food on the table. With all the cuts that the government's making, with, you know, taking away programs and stuff like that, I feel bad for those people. And so I don't want to have a tax increase, But I don't know of any other way around keeping what we have in the city by not doing it. I don't. If you tell me a way to figure
I'm
it
not
out.
saying no to all property tax increases. But I'm telling you, we are gonna be at these crossroads again next year, and God willing, I'll still be here. And I'll still be ringing the same bell. And, you know, I put a message out that we were gonna go and look at a 15%. I want you to know that it got probably 80 comments. And the comments were 10-1. And they all began with, please, don't raise my taxes. So if
Did you
there's
ask?
somebody you guys want to pummel, then pummel me, but I'm carrying that message. Because of a contract that I have with my son on my home, I don't pay these increases. So I'm not going to be knocking on anyone's door for the 75. But I want people to know that every time we do this, it never comes up. I told the mayor this probably a couple of nights ago. I called him. In my 30 years of being a reporter and covering municipal governments, I have never seen a city government that has been able to property tax their way out of problems. And I have only seen on 2 occasions in 30 years, a city come back and decrease taxes as a result of their sales tax revenue. And that was Farmington as a result of Farmington Station, and Layton as a result of the mall. And that's it. And all the other taxes stayed.
So what is your solution then? And did you ask all those 10 people, if they don't want to raise their taxes, how do they expect us keep our city running? Does anybody have any solutions?
I have a couple, but I don't know that, I can't say for sure they'll work. But yeah, I do have a couple. One, I think that we should look at doing some kind of hiring freeze in hopes of a 6-month period being able to attrition, bring each department down 1 employee so that we can have that extra money to cut the tax rate in half. Instead of a 15, a 7. That would do it. And no department would lose more than 1 person over the course of that period. And to ensure that, we could use reserve funds. If you guys spend the 300,000 they found and don't have that for next year, what's the difference between taking it from there out of the reserve fund? There is no difference.
Well, Brandon's already short employees. Theron's down to,
I'm fully staffed full-time right now. knock
yeah.
on wood.
And then, I don't know, Michelle,
Fully staffed.
fully staffed, could you give up an employee? I mean, Theron's already given up 2, so I don't know. You'd have to talk to each.
I would, but that would be through natural attrition. I'm not
But-
roll anybody's job.
But the signal that we send to our employees via forced attrition is, I don't think, the message we want to send, because we just put that out in a public forum, and that is what we anticipate. We are signaling to our employees that we are basically saying we want to force somebody to leave, which I think would be more of a large scale domino effect then what we do actually, it's not good. I've been through forced attrition environments, and it actually has worse effects than the nominal effect that we're trying to exact here. So I wouldn't be in favor of the hiring freeze and trying to force attrition. It's never a good recipe.
Well, let me make just one comment, if you don't mind. Brandon, through a lot of what you just heard in the last 20 minutes, I am also, as well as everything that's been said, very appreciative of the fact that you keep the water running into my home and you help us to make sure we can get the things ejected that we need. So every department, and Michelle, there's solid evidence indicating that if we in fact provide recreational programs to our children and the youth, they're much more unlikely to have to deal with Chief Wynn's operations and the courts. So everyone in this room offers incredible service, okay, to this city and to the residents. So even though the conversation may be drifted one to the other, please don't walk away thinking is that you're not important. What we have is an interesting challenge. We need some direction on where you want to take it. And I want to remind what Matt Wilson said. You're not voting tonight. It has to be in a different public setting. What we're trying to get is a heading check in terms of what you want, and you will see on the 17th where you will be asked to vote. We've taken at least a couple hours to work through this. If we can flush it out tonight, we won't have to basically have the same conversation again on the 17th, because there's some things we have to get done on the 7th. So, Matt, I think we're getting closer. I think we're getting some ideas here. Best I can tell, and you need to make sure that you're okay with this, because you are the author of this budget. The law says you have to present it. You have certainly done that. Now the question is, council, what adjustments you want to make in this budget that's going to allow him then to finalize this and present a plan to you, a draft budget on the 17th that you're willing to approve?
So really, the next meeting is where you vote on that budget to say this is the maximum rate. Understand that that maximum rate goes out, advertises, let's say it's 15, it's gonna go out as 15%. That's the max that you can actually go. So if you say 20, it's gonna be advertised as 20 and everybody's gonna think it's 20. It does give you a little extra time. Let's say you say it's 15, you have extra time because you actually adopt that budget during that tax increase. In the second meeting in August. So going through a tax process, the tax increase process, the truth in taxation, you have a little bit extra time to go through the weeds of the budget document and to make those adjustments. So the next meeting, the primary focus needs to be on what's that maximum rate, and then you can adopt the tentative budget, so.
But included in that is, what are we gonna do with Brandon? He's bleeding. What are we gonna do? Okay, and it needs to be in the document. What are we going to do about Chief Williams? He's bleeding. And then the rest of the organization, who in fact is suffering, but not as suffering to the extent that fire department and public works are at this moment. That's what, in my opinion, needs to be in that budget document. How do we fix this? At least if it's temporary, and to your point, Diane, if it's just, hey, we're gonna have to take this in increment, then define what it is, and then we get that into the budget document. And that's what's presented, and that's what will be approved.
Can I ask clarification, Brandon? When you were talking about using the other funding to possibly work the raise in your department, could you please just clarify how that would work?
Yeah, so enterprise funds, that doesn't come from property tax, so we could utilize that money to solve in the majority of my department. It'd mainly just be my street department that comes out of general fund, and then a portion of my building maintenance and fleet services.
Can I jump in, Brandon? I think specifically your question, Brandon's problem is not necessarily how the funding comes, because those enterprise funds come in and they have to be spent in those certain ways. Brandon's problem is our policy of how we handle employees. Brandon's problem is that he as a manager has no flexibility on how to pay people. And our wages, specific to Brandon, he can't bring someone in competitively because to bring in a one-year person, they would outpay his five-year people. And so Brandon's issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, they're not necessarily tax increase problems or budget concerns. It's our policy of compensation that has given him the difficulty.
Just to put it in perspective, my water department makes less now than they did 5 years ago. And you know what inflation's done, so.
And they stay with you.
How does?
Is that something that's addressed with
No.
this budget, or is that something?
That's more so with years of service. So as people leave, that, when we were doing an evaluation on wages, that water department decreased their wages of what the city's paying out for that water department because of years of service.
People not senior there.
The question, and Diane, I think your question is like, how do you fix it? It certainly relates to budget a little bit because of the street departments, and also he's got to manage his funding from all those sources. But to fix specific to Brandon's issue, it is a policy decision on how we pay our employees that has to be approved by the council. It's not necessarily in this budget. We could take that up in July, we could take that up in September.
And if we changed that, then that would be a policy for the entire city, not just for his.
Well, I mean,
right?
it could be, it could not be. I mean, you could make a policy specific to public works because their funding is different. I mean, we have different, practically speaking, we have different rules for public safety, right? State mandates that we have different rules for them. So there's a wide range of things, if you want to talk about that aren't specific to this budget.
So that's something that Brandon could bring up for a change in the way they're paid, and we could bring it to a council meeting. He could.
We could certainly work it, but like, just in harsh reality, to speak truthfully, to say Brandon fix it, I mean, the trickle down effect of that touches every employee in the city.
Yeah, so I'll give a council member Scadden ism, and that is, again, plagiarism is the highest form of flattery. Is there anybody in the public works space anywhere that we can take that has taken and addressed this wage issue, even if it's not within Utah, somewhere else, within the US? Again, plagiarism being the highest form of flattery. Find somebody else that's doing it, so we have a bit of a blueprint to work off of, and I'm amenable to taking it into consideration.
And I also then address the turnover. So the turnover numbers we have were for the last 3 years. And we narrow it down to like the last year, are those numbers increasing? Are we at 90% because we averaged in 3 years for this last year? Or are we looking better this last year? And then is everyone fully staffed right now or not fully staffed right now? Just, because if we're gonna do a one-time wage bump sort of thing, maybe you could do it, not bump, but a one-time wage adjustment. Maybe it would be, you'd have to maybe adjust it. It'd be a little more complicated, but people that have only been here a month or 2 months, we're happy you're here, but maybe that wouldn't, maybe we'd have to adjust it. So the people that really have been here with that dedication could get it. But anyway, without all that thought process, what are the first two, like what's our turnover in the last 1 year? And is everyone fully staffed possibly right now?
So 3 years ago, I believe the turnover ratio was about 25%, and then the last 2 years have been about 17. So it did get a little bit better, but this year and last year were about the same.
I would just add, because Parks and Rec currently is very lucky to be fully staffed, it doesn't mean we still don't have a wage issue. Those people that are currently staffed with us are still underpaid for their position
Right.
compared to surrounding cities and our neighbors.
And then that's the
So,
longevity comes in.
yeah,
But yeah, because Parks and Rec, you have so many part-time employees just work in the summer. And how many full-time employees do you have in
We-
Parks?
in parks or
Well, like in your
Everybody?
department,
I
so.
have 12 or 13
12 or
total
13.
full-time employees.
And then
then
this,
we supplement with all the part-timers.
And how
whether
many
it's-
is that usually, part-timers, like,
Oh geez.
does that include lifeguard and
70,
everything?
Yeah,
So
60
that's a lot.
lifeguards, 60. And I'm talking specifically to the full-timers.
Right.
Those guys are paid under what they
And,
should.
and what's your full-timer, what's the lowest years that any of your full-timers, how long they've been there?
I have one that has been with us for the last 6-8 months.
Oh, 6-8 months. And some
Recent.
I think that's the next follow-up question is, you know, the turnover versus. you know, how
Tenure,
many
yeah.
Year versus how many have been here 2 years, you know, that kind of, what the ratio is on that.
So let me see if I understand, Diane, your point. Would you like to have a task for the city to provide between now and the 17th? Some specific information to the council that helps you in this decision process?
I believe that that information would probably help cement the need, like, you know, if we're having this much turnover, how many people do we have that are what, 1 year and 2 year? And that would help, I think, our citizens understand where you know, more fully what the critical need is.
Yeah, do we have the ability to take and generate like a tenure report across the different departments? Because again, if we're talking, is what I'm hearing, Diane, is what you're kind of advocating for is like a one-time spot bonus with some of that one-time funds that we had come in. Is that kind of what you're thinking or what you're trying to articulate?
I think that that could be a good use of that $300,000 that we have from that land sale. And how you would divide it up, that would be part of the discussion. But also just to help us as council, but as the citizens to understand. We talk about this turnover, but what's the status right now? We have, you know, 20% of the fire department or whatever department, you know, 1 year or less, or, you know what I mean? It gives you, when you use those numbers, then think it helps people say, whoa, I see where you're coming from. And it gives, I think, more impetus to the importance of what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. And then again, this is where like April 22 to March of 2025, fire has, chief, correct me, how many full-time employees do you have?
Right, currently?
Yeah.
We have 41.
41. So over the course of that time frame, we have had 70% of that turnover. And again, that's just to quantify it for people. So we have lost, in essence, pretty much the entire department has done a complete and total turnover. Same thing with Public Works over the same time horizon.
And so if we can look at right now in our department, how many people are 1 year or less, or 2 years or less, I think it's just another way to look at that turnover. And it might help people understand that impact in a different way.
Agreed. I follow you. No, I'm in agreement. I get what you're saying.
Council is agreeable. We can certainly ask Matt, okay, provide us some tenure information on all the employees so that you can see it. And I think the evidence is going to show that those who probably are most vulnerable will probably be those who are 7 year, 8 year or less. Those who have probably been here 12 years, 15 years may feel very comfortable and be in positions where they don't make those for the most part. But let the data point. So that's one report we can provide. What else do you want? What else do you think you'll need to help us get on this, down on the 7th?
I have a question on the 300,000, and you're looking to do a couple $1,000s for each employee, depending on how, like, it worked out. Would that stop? I don't see that stopping the bleeding. Would that prevent people from leaving? What's your thoughts?
The other dilemma with doing like the one-time spot bonus is somebody could take the bonus and still leave. So unless we had some type of clawback mechanism, that would be one thing to take into consideration. But again, just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I just don't see it fixing any kind of bleeding. I think it's
Mhm.
it doesn't help.
Well, I just like to throw a question. I mean, as council members, my question to you would be, what type of fire department do you want? And that's really your decision. On what level do you want it at, Brian? What level do you want it at?
I want it at the top level.
Then there's a solution to that. And I can just tell you, losing this many employees And I can only speak of the fire department, but I think we're all pretty much on the same page.
Concept's the same.
Yeah, the concept. If you want that level, there is a price to be paid. I cannot go look at my firefighter, turn around, Brian, and tell them that. Like, we want you here, but they have families. They are working second jobs, so they're in the same situation. I think all of us in whatever career you're at, if you could go and make more money to a neighboring jurisdiction or agency or whatever that is, you're gonna go. So I mean, I don't know how to even, when someone comes in and applies, which we don't have a lot, what should I tell them? You're gonna be paid lower. We have a great culture here, but the culture comes from the people. That's where this culture in Roy City is so great, but when you lose the people, that culture has changed, that whole dynamic has changed. We don't even have that no more. I think we're arrogant to say that other agencies don't have a good culture. They have it and they're being paid more. So I'm asking you, how do I tell them? I look at them in the face, stay at Roy. Trust me, we trust the council. We've said that over and over. And I can't look them in good faith and say, stay here. Give me an answer to tell them, and I don't have it. So I'm just talking in general. I'm not here to create any animosity. I'm just telling you, I need you to tell me what type of fire, what does the public want? And I will provide that. But I'm telling you now, my level is here. If you don't want that, then we have a difference. But I would think that we had the 9-year-old in today that got hit by the car. These firefighters are the one who saved his life. And the police, they provided it. We saved the child's life, and it's real. I'm not saying what public works or parks are important, but to your point, Brian, your neighbor who's maybe has an issue with that money they have to pay, and I know the fixed income. Go talk to the family of the 9-year-old today and ask those people. And I know you know that. I'm just saying.
And I'm just trying to, honestly, Chief, I am truly trying to balance the faces of these firefighters with the faces of the people that say please to me 2 and 3 times a week now. And so I'm trying to find that balance for the electorate that we do serve. And I understand that. I mean, I didn't sign up 2 years ago to run for office to be everybody's pain in the butt. I swear. But I want you to know that I hold all of the people in public safety, parks and rec, public works in high esteem. I've got to be able, though, to go back to the people that are truly hurting. And when I say truly hurting, I mean the people that are attending your blessing box. It's always empty because there's so many people that go there. So with some of the people we're not reaching. And maybe I'm just here to make sure they don't get forgotten. That's all.
And I'm grateful. I'm just saying, I've got to tell them, and I have to. They are my family. I am their leader. And I have to tell them, either you go and take care of your family and leave Roy. When do I say that? What point? And get honest with them. I can't do that now. Right now, they trust us and and the public, and we have to make these hard decisions. I'm just trying to explain to you, help me as a leader. I've took an oath to run the fire department, and you've put me in charge of that. And it's your fire department. It's the public's fire department and everywhere. What level do they want? I need to know. And so I can tell them, stay here or go.
Right, and me and Sophie met with one of his employees who travels from West Valley, who's taking care of her mother. She was already recruited to another fire department. They were gonna hire her on the spot. And she would have made more money, but she's like, this is my family. I love Roy. And so she's willing to stay till she finds out, what we're gonna do. If it's worth it for her to go to another, district or to stay with the family that she loves. And so, I mean, I told her I would do everything I can to try to keep her in Roy because she I know what it's like. My brother-in-law was a paramedic and worked for Ogden for 30 years, and he said, it's a family. And you hate to break up that family. And I see both ways of it, but after talking with her and seeing how badly she wants to stay at Roy because she genuinely, it's her family, it's hard to look these guys in the face and have them leave. And I understand where you're coming from also. I know it's a hard thing to figure out. I wish we had easy solutions. I wish, maybe we could, those people that are really hurting, maybe there's somehow that other people in the city that have more money, cause somehow we could get a list of those people and maybe help them out some way for those who have more and could give more. I would be willing to take food to people's houses.
No,
But, anything that we could help those people in order to keep our people here in this city, I'd be willing, and I know Randy be willing, and I have neighbors and brothers that live in Roy that would do the same thing to keep it so that they can still have food on the table. I know people with large families, it costs money for them to play sports. Do you have fee waivers? For kids that don't have the money. I know at the high school where I work, we have free, large percentage of kids that eat free lunch. And then they still come in the office every day and we give them snacks every day because they're hungry. So I know that there is a need for people. And I'm glad we have, fee waivers for kids to play sports that don't have the money. And I think we could maybe come up with a solution to help those people if they just reach out to us. I know it could be a prideful thing. They don't want, maybe to know, maybe someone's lost their job. I feel for those people. My son-in-law was without a job for a long time and it takes a toll on the family. I think money is the worst issue a marriage could ever have. I think it tears the family apart. Worrying about paying, your bills, having food on the table, feeding your kids. You want them to be popular and be able to play sports and have the cool clothes and everything too. You're just worried about your rent. And so, but I want to keep our city a place where, we're a family. I see that at the high school, the support we get at every game. We're just a community unlike any other. And everybody at the district says that. Roy is just special. And so I just think if we could help those people in order to help them pay their taxes or put food on their table, I think that, there would be a lot of people in this community that would help those people. Because I don't want to lose this family. I don't want to lose these guys. I don't want to lose anybody. And so I think that if it's going to be a struggle for people to have that tax increase, I just think we're going to have to look for ways to help them because we just can't have it both ways.
Okay. Great comments. Appreciate that. Sophie, you asked her something. Did you get an answer?
No.
Do you feel comfortable with?
Yeah, because you can't use that money for human capital. You're just gonna get yourself deeper and deeper next year. And that's where I struggle.
Are you talking about, you mean for, like a long-term wage, is that what you're saying?
Long-term, yeah.
Cause to Sophie's point, would a one-time wage adjustment be of any value? Cause I don't think that was
When you
fully
say
answered.
wage adjustment, you're just meaning a
Of
bonus.
what, basically, would that be of any value?
In my opinion, no.
Cause I think she's got a very good point there that we need to discuss.
Okay, so it really comes down to this idea that says you have extra money, would bonuses help? We certainly have a comment that suggests is they could help, but it's not the solution. It could create some challenges. Chief, you had a comment.
Question. So we are fully staffed, right? We have a significant number of new people. So in the last year, we put 6 people through the academy. Of those 6, only 2 are actually on the road on their own. Right? So now we're sending 2-man cars to a call instead of a 1-man car. So our reduced capability, we now have reduced capability to respond. And we're finding ourselves now more often than not at minimum manning. And we're at or below minimum manning, then we start incurring overtime costs. So I know the discussion today has been surrounded around you know, the cost of the employee. And when I have this conversation with my employees, and the conversation is put in the context, do you want better pay? Because that's what is being garnered around the county, or do you want more people? I'm only gonna be able to fight for one, I'm not gonna be able to fight for both. And it's been more pay so that we can be competitive. Whether we think the merit system is broke or not, we know what the entry dollar rate is in the area. We know what the max dollar rate is in the area. I'm agnostic what it looks like in the middle. My employees are likely agnostic what it looks like in the middle. They just want to get what they're worth. And they want to know that their employer is going to pay them what they're worth, or they're going to go somewhere that's willing to pay them what they're worth. Problem that I see coming, and I just say this because we're going to have to address this sooner or later, is if and when we get the pay issue fixed, we have a staffing problem. Right? And eventually I'm gonna be like, okay, we're done talking about pay, because I agree with you. I'm sick of having this conversation year after year after year. Right? But we're gonna have to bring on additional people to help with the workload. Because there's one thing that the city is not control over. One, that's how much equipment and training costs, and those continuously skyrocket, and that's out of our control. Right? And demand continues to increase. Okay? And so we are saving money as we have newer folks coming in. That is happening, but the trade-off for us is we're continuously at minimum manning, which presents a problem. And in our last shooting, if you read the report, what I didn't put in there is we had employees with a guy on FTO trying to manage an active shooting scene and work and get distracted with a recruit. Right? And so overtime, we don't choose when planes land in our city. We don't choose when mobile homes catch on fire. Like, there are so many uncontrolled costs that are becoming part of this problem as well. And so I'm just putting the lay of the land. It's much more bigger than pay. Pay is a big issue. Fixing pay, I don't think is going to solve the entire problem. But my question is circuit breakers. Do circuit breakers, when it comes to property taxes, isn't there a circuit breaker they can apply for with the county that would maybe
Yes,
address
there is.
Councilman
To
Saxon's
do with
problem?
assets and, yeah, it's true. We were counting.
Provide that to residents when they find themselves in that. I personally have provided information, to your point, for those who reach that. The conditions are very stringent to qualify, but if they qualify, it's a good relief. Okay, Matt, here's my takeaway. There's certainly an interest, okay, at this moment to suggest is that a property tax is something to really consider. Whether it's one digit or whether or not it's double digit, I think that's going to have to basically flush out. I'm sensing, at least if we can provide some more retention, 10-year report that talks about how many people we have and where they stand in terms of 1 year, 5 year, whatever kind of information for the employees would be helpful to the city council in terms as they start to zero in and finalizing. I'm sensing, Amber, you will probably get your hard numbers by the 8th, which will give us about a week prior to going into the decision point. So we may have a little better in terms of what the number is going to be once you get an idea of what comes from the county. I'm also sensing, unless you tell me otherwise, there's a sincere desire to deal with public works and bleeding and fire department bleeding and try to address those, but recognize that in fact, other departments in whole are also struggling and will struggle until the problem is found and the solution, I say, is found. So to the extent by which what we've been provided, Matt, do you feel like we have an idea of what we can do in order to prepare for the 17th?
Yeah, I think we'll be prepared for the 17th, just knowing that we have to have that maximum tax rate, and then we can work out the details after that. So we would have to have that maximum tax rate voted on the 17th.
We got to have a public hearing. There certainly will be a public hearing when we go through a truth and taxation discussion. What about next week or the 17th?
So yes, we do have a public hearing scheduled. We actually have 5 or 6 of them, just so you know.
Okay. So the key would be is just recognize the one piece that we've missed in this. Brian alluded to some that he's already getting, I suspect. Randy, you were indicating you're also getting some feedback. We still have, before you lock in, we still got to listen to what the public says. I think if what I'm hearing is the more detail you can provide, the more Kevlar you can place in front of you, okay, to help you as you make a decision one way or another. What we need from you is we need a ceiling on the 17th. And then on the second meeting in August, we will ask for a vote. 2 votes coming, the ceiling and then the final budget.
Can I just ask, right now, I don't see any solution then, if we don't feel that a bonus, for other words, is going to be of any help, I don't see any solution for a wage increase unless we do what Chief Williams is offering. Otherwise, there is nothing in that current budget, even if we use 15% tax raise to satisfy that, because that extra 300,000 is one-time money, which we really can't use in that regard. You know, Sophie brought up a really good point. You know, that stopgap really probably isn't very stopgap-ish. It sounded nice, but a one-time bonus, if it's not going to accomplish it, then that would not be a wise use of that money. So I guess that's my concern, is we can come up with a percentage, but I'm not sure we've actually addressed, you know, 75% of the concern.
That's right. You know, the 300,000, and to your point, would be a start, but it won't fix the problem, because you're 14% behind, and that equates to, by the numbers, 1.2 million. And then there's the other piece that talks about the normal COLA and that, so you're close to $2 million. Now, recognize part of that will be in public works, because the franchise dollars, and some of that will be in general fund. But the fact of the matter is, to fix the problem is if you want to fix the problem with personnel, and setting aside, Chief, your comment about this more than just salary, because it is, then what you got to do is you got to implement the salary survey. I've not seen it. I'll bet you haven't seen it either. But the salary survey probably will shock you. But that's what it takes in order for the city to get us average in salary pay with our neighbors.
Well, I know I'm on this mosquito abatement committee, and I know I sit next to, he's the chief at North Ogden, Barker, is his last name, and when I showed him what our firemen start at, and his, they're gonna give me a chart, he basically laughed out loud. Seriously? That's all they get paid? I mean, he's like, wow, you actually can keep them there? I mean, those were his comments to me. And I was, yeah, so we gotta figure out something.
Even if we do a 20% raise, all that does is break us even, because tax increase, I should say 20% tax increase, because now all that means is that one-time money finally goes in a one-time spot. I mean, that's all that means. So a 15%, which I think, as I've been talking to the public, they realize things cost more. 15% sure sounds a lot better to them than 16 to 20, whatever it is in the mind. 15% sounds okay, but we're still digging ourselves into a hole using 15%. So
The only thing, the 15%, or for this matter, if you were to pay all the COLA and you were to pay all of the merit increases as the system sits today, it just means you have to come back to the well next year to deal with the next COLA and the next merit increase that will be accumulated for next year. These are year-to-year incremental increases. That's just how it is.
It doesn't, every city just deal with the same thing that we
A lot
do?
of cities have been, yes.
Yes, I mean, I don't know how, I mean, everything goes up. Eggs, you know, gas,
Fertilizer.
fertilizer, chemicals for the aquatic center. I mean, everything goes up. I mean, you do get a small percentage in Social Security, which I'm on.
Yeah. Well, and again, a dollar store isn't even a dollar store anymore. There's no such thing as a 99-cent Wendy's menu anymore. The cost of goods have just consistently gone up. It's just, it is what it is.
So Brody, what was you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I'll say this because, Matt is much more of a gentleman than I am. When we crafted this budget, we had the work session that went till 10 o'clock and we brought forth these issues. And the reality is to fix the wages, to just get us to level, not only considering like the compensation, the 7.5% of operational cuts that still aren't in the budget that we took out last year. We're talking also about like the planning, the key challenges that the slide that I went through, we're not addressing those at all. Like what this budget was how do we plug the holes so the ship doesn't sink and give you the least amount of taxes? Because if we as administration came up and said, well, we need it at 48%, like Brian and everyone else would come at us with pitchforks, rightfully so, right? So it goes back to what Chief said. We need to know as staff is what do you want, right? To fix this point, you're right, it's a big number. And there are things we're working on and doing, but all those things have costs, right? Like we talk about economic development. That doesn't come without scrutiny and yelling and screaming and Facebook comments as well. So yes, the reality is the 15 to 20% keeps the boat afloat. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't put the 7.5% back. It doesn't give Chief all his bullets. That's been the analogy. He still doesn't have all his bullets. You know, we talk about the complex a lot. We could have that discussion for a long time. You know, we talk about the complex 2 years ago. All we heard was, how did we get here? We got here because we didn't fund any improvements on the complex or the aquatic center. We've been doing that since we approved the complex. So like really the 15% is like, let's just plug the holes and, you know, we want to do things to improve sales tax and property tax and help our economic base. But those projects are at best 2 years away from providing real economic value to the city. So to your point, Darren, this is a stopgap budget. This doesn't improve the things that we need to really talk about.
And it comes down to that one slide at the very first that we've gone over, raise taxes, economic development or cut services. It comes down to that. And unless we do one of those, we have to balance. I mean, we can't play with the numbers in any other way, but just to make them balance. So.
How do you cut one employee per, I don't know how you would even do that.
And the reality is we do it just like we did the 7.5% operationals. That is not fun. That was not fun. That has there's real life consequences to that. However, like Matt said, we're required as staff to balance the budget. So if that is where we're headed, we'll figure it out. But we're not talking about these improvements in the budget. This is
It's tough decisions for us to make. And then like you said, Facebook comments, I mean, people just, they don't understand we're trying to make this the best city for them to live in. They don't have any solutions, but they have lots of accusations against us. But then I'm like, well, then what's your solution? I don't know. Why don't you run for council? I don't want to do that. I mean, so we're just trying to do the best what we can.
and just, we've all kind of spoke a little bit. None of us are envious of your position, right? Like, bless you all. Like, it's a tough spot. But the challenge is for us is you tell us what to do and we go do it. And so that's kind of, I think, where we're all at is we need to know what you want us to do.
Yeah, and this fulfilled his requirement. His requirement for the council would be as a percent of budget. You have a budget. You can approve it as it written. And then we deal with the consequences. You can make changes to it, adjustments to it. In fact, the first meeting we had in January, I gave you 34 pages of data to help you to see where you want to make adjustments. It's all there. But the bottom line would be is that on August, whatever the third week and Tuesday in the month is, you have to make the final decision. And you have to decide what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. So let me just ask this question. Is there anything else you would like to ask, and particularly ask the department heads, to answer some questions you have? I think they've been well spoke. There've been some good information shared. I'm not saying it's easy, but you certainly have asked some really good questions and made great comments. Right now, we have an action to look at employee tenure data. We'll get that information to you, help you in the process. I'm not going to ask you for a number because I think we're still way away from that. I'm hearing 20, I'm hearing 9, I'm hearing less. So trying to boil down, we'll be here another couple hours to get that. But you do have to come in with a number in the public meeting on the 17th. I need to walk out there with a majority vote to get us a number. And that's the ceiling, whatever that is. And it can be 0 or to the ceiling. So you're not set to that ceiling, but Matt was right. You go out there and put a number in public, they're gonna remember the ceiling, not necessarily what the actual will be. So I'm gonna need to have that information. So you got 2 weeks to ask department heads, to ask Matt, any questions you personally are gonna help you to be able to make that final decision. I would ask that we have 2 departments who are really bleeding, and they need a solution. And as I told Matt, and I'll tell you, if you approve a budget and he can put the language in that budget document that you approve, then everything that you heard or you want done will be done by law. It's not like another resolution. It's not like something else, because that is an approved document by you. And if you go up there and says, Chief, do what you got to do based on what you recommend, then you say that, and it's in that document, in that budget document, and then he has the authority, once you approve it, to do exactly what you want him to do. Brandon, same thing with you. These are the 2 ones that are bleeding, but the problem that we have exists within the entire city. And I'm telling you, it will not be fixed until we get our revenue stream coming in, that we're generating more property tax, more sales tax. We have to get the sales tax revenue up. And the way to do that, and you're gonna face another battle, because you're gonna have a lot of people that don't want certain types of development in the city. And they're gonna hammer you. They already have. But that's the answer. As hard as that is, I would much rather say to Matt in 5 years, in 6 years, that says you're able to generate enough sales tax to be able to meet the demands and needs of this. Because whether you believe this or not, okay, and I've been here a long time, okay, there was a time we had lots of money. And there was a time, okay, that when a department says, I need a supplement, can we do something, that we took money out of the fund balance and we paid for those salary increases. We paid for those emergencies. We just pulled it out. We voted and made it happen. There was plenty of money to make those choices. That is not the case today.
Well, I think that's the whole country.
There you
Just,
go.
you know, the whole,
Start doing our part.
everything has changed,
Yeah.
the whole environment, so.
If
Yeah.
we can bring more development in and we can help basically supplement that, and I'm here to tell you that's our objective. And it's gonna put a lot of pressure on Brody and Matt. But I'm going to tell you that in fact is happening. But let me just echo what I sent you in the mail the other day. So there's absolutely no question. There was a time, in fact, we did get a little bang from people out there saying is, when we made the announcement and I told you that they're gonna put a Home Depot in Clinton, okay? There was people that were pretty upset with Roy City leadership. How can Clinton get that Home Depot and not Roy? And the fact is that in 2007, Roy was approached, okay, to put, and I sent you the KSO article, or excuse me, I think it was probably Desert News article that said, and Tony provided that says, we are going to bed down the Home Depot in Roy. There was already one in Riverdale, and they want to put one in Roy. And you know where I'm talking about, they want it. And it was gonna happen. Until the public said no. And the council said no. They just didn't bring it here. And had they have put that where they were planning to put it and wanted to put it, we would not have this conversation about whether Home Depot should be in Roy or not. It would have been here. So you're gonna get some pushback. But if you keep the long view in mind, you keep it in mind where we're trying to go and how we're trying to bring development here so that we don't have to fight this battle anymore. We have the revenue necessary for all departments to be able to meet the demands of what they need to do to keep us a great city. Then I will indicate to you is that just look at the long view as we go through this process and let's make smart decisions. I'm not saying ignore the residents' input. You have to listen. But look for solutions, look for answers as we take on these next set of challenges that I promise you, you're going to see before the end of the year.
Well, and I think developers probably watch our council meetings and see, you know, and then they look at our population, the income, and if their business fits in our city also. I mean, we can ask somebody to come to our city, but then they look at us and they're like, they don't have enough money to sustain our business. I mean, like you said, Applebee's would have been down by Kent's Market, but then they said they didn't have a lunch crowd, so they didn't put it there. So I think, you know, I mean, we can try to get businesses to come in, but a lot of businesses do their own homework anyway and look at cities and probably listen, want to see what kind of people they're working with, and we're going to be receptive to, you know, everything that they want in our business, in our city too. So you know, we don't have a lot of land to even put a business unless somebody sells or tears down something. If somebody sells a property, put something up, but at least we have some housing going in a couple places that will bring us in some property taxes. But for businesses, there's just not a lot unless.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll just tell you, UDOT did two things to us. One is it's going to help us improve the traffic in Roy. But for business revenue, okay, it opened land. And for the first time since I was a city council member and I started working with Woodbury, for the first time, Brody, we've got developers interested in our downtown. I'm waiting for a project. We certainly get a lot of talk, but I'm looking for a project. And I'm saying is that when Brody and his team basically says we have something and there's a lot of conversation that taking place. It's not taking place in a long time. We have some hope on the horizon, but let's not lose sight of the comment that says that this is a 2-year, 3-year wait for us to get there. We got to bridge that. And the way we got to bridge that is deal with the issues we're facing today. So is there anything else you want to say before I ask for a motion to adjourn?
Let me make just 2 quick comments and then I'll have my piece. Much to the chagrin of the general public, there is no magic wand. There is no pot of gold that we can take and entice developers to come to our city. That is not how economic development works. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is I think we need to consistently, from a messaging perspective, need to hammer home that we are not like the federal government. We are statutorily required to run a balanced budget. So for every dollar of revenue that we take in, we have to return a dollar of service or some type of amenity in kind. And so just as we're going through this budget process, remember, just because we raise somebody's property taxes, there still is that social contract that says for every dollar that we take in, we have to give back in an in-kind service. So I just wanted to make that kind of my closing statement. So thank you all and greetings from Florida.
Any other comments, council?
Something, Mayor.
Please. Steve.
I know we all care for the residents and we care for the employees. But tonight there's a message that's been sent. I don't know what that necessarily is going to be with each individual as I sit here. But I think one way we frame this is if we care for the residents, right? Our job is to get someone there when they call 911 for both of us. I think you can show that care by providing the excellent service. I think we have to look at different. I think the residents want that. So if we care about them, we need to provide the services to them. You know, Diane, you talked about the turnover. 2/3 of my department is under 3 years. I could have them stand right now, those under 5 years, if I need to give a really good visual. But if this message we're sending and the employees are listening in and all facts, or all the departments, they have a decision to make. And it's pending, like it could be catastrophic for me. You've looked at it, 6, 8, 9, 1 year, they have a decision to make. And it's really pending to me at least with my department, the decisions that are made in this room. And that will lower the level of service. I cannot send to a cardiac arrest to you, Brian, 8 to 9 individuals under 3 years and expect to provide a 5-star service. I can't, because they have to be trained. It takes time. So those are the consequences to the decisions that are being made, is when we talk about the level of service. And that's what I thought, with 2/3 of the department, when a plane goes down or a house fire goes off and there's 2 fatalities, I'm sending, it's also a safety issue, at least for public safety for us, that you would need to consider and the public needs to consider. So I'll leave it at that. I know it's a hard decision. I truly have good intent, but it's just a decision and decisions we have to make. But if the message is we care for the employees and the residents, there's no better way than to provide them a top-notch service that they require and want and deserve. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Matt?
Okay.
You want to summarize and we'll, call
Yeah,
for-
so I do have 2 more slides. You're welcome to read them. I won't bore you with them. But with that being said, please be prepared for our next city council meeting. That's gonna be a big date. We still have a lot to work to do. Obviously, we all care very deeply for the city and we all want the best for it. So, and I think we can get there.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, do I have a motion then to adjourn? And that was?
Me.
Ken, thanks, Ann. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
And that was? Sophie, thanks, Sophie. Okay, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, great comments and great input.